Senator van Turnhout on Amendment 6.
Amendment 6, yeah. I am going to take a little bit of time on this amendment. So I move amendment number 6, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging and thanking Peter Newell of the Global Initiative to End All Corporal Punishment of Children, which promotes the universal prohibition and elimination of corporal punishment. And I've worked with Peter for many years on this issue, including when I was Chief Executive of the Children's Rights Alliance. Minister, in November 2012, the people of Ireland voted to enshrine children's rights in the Irish Constitution. And I know it was appealed, but it was signed into law on the 28th of April this year, and I'm delighted to have my updated copy of the Irish Constitution, which firmly places children's rights at the heart of our Constitution. And in Article 42A1, it clearly states the state recognises and affirms the natural and imprescriptible rights of all children and shall, as far as practicable, by its laws, protect and vindicate those rights. What I'm proposing in this amendment is to ensure that all citizens are equal in the eyes of the law. Why do we still believe it's acceptable for corporal punishment to be in our laws? The Committee on the Rights of the Child defines corporal or physical punishment as any punishment in which physical force is used and intended to cause some degree of pain or discomfort, however light. Most involves hitting, smacking, slapping, spanking children with the hand or with an implement, a whip, a stick, belt, shoe, wooden spoon, etc. But it can also involve, for example, kicking, shaking or throwing children, scratching, pinching, biting, pulling hair or boxing ears, forcing children to stay in uncomfortable positions, burning, scalding or forced ingestion. In the view of the committee, corporal punishment is invariably degrading. Adults have a talent for inventing euphemisms to make them feel more comfortable while they inflict pain and humiliation such as spanking or smacking. The truth is that for a child, all of this is violence, and if it were directed at an adult, it would constitute criminal assault. Minister, I'm very conscious that when I raise this issue, people often believe it's a judgment on how they themselves were raised. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome my own mother here tonight, Jenny, to the gallery. And she will concur that I was raised with the "you're not too old for the wooden spoon." Now, thankfully, she never had to use it. Indeed, only in Ireland, I wonder, is the wooden spoon not solely seen as a kitchen utensil, but as a weapon. Times have moved on, and our understanding of the effects of corporal punishment on children has increased. There are many good reasons for us to ban corporal punishment. It causes serious harm to children. It teaches children that violence is an acceptable way of solving conflicts. It is ineffective as a means of discipline, and there are positive ways to teach, correct or discipline children which are better for the child's development and health. And it's more difficult to protect children from severe abuse if some forms of violence are legitimate. And that's from the Council of Europe, Minister. In tandem, Minister, I appreciate we must provide parents with sufficient support in bringing up their children, including educating and supporting them on good parenting skills. In Europe, Minister, 28 states in the wider Europe have prohibited all corporal punishment, including in the family, and another 51 states have clearly and publicly committed to achieving a full ban. Ireland has been found in violation of the European Social Charter by the Council of Europe body, the European Committee of Social Rights. However, I hope the government will find itself in a position to accept this amendment because it is the right thing to do. We must uphold and protect children's rights. Indeed, in preparing for tonight, I read a quote again from Janusz Korczak, who any children's rights activist will know. He was a Polish-Jewish paediatrician, educationist and children's author, and he wrote in 1925 in his book, The Child's Right to Respect. In what extraordinary circumstances would one dare to push, hit or tug an adult? And yet it is considered so routine and harmless to give a child a tap or a stinging smack or to grab it by the arm. The feeling of powerlessness creates respect for power. Not only adults, but anyone who is older and stronger can cruelly demonstrate their displeasure, back up their words with force, demand obedience and abuse the child without being punished. We set an example that fosters contempt for the weak, This is bad parenting and sets a bad precedent. And that was in 1925. In a publication in Sweden to mark over 90 years on from Sweden's abolition of corporal punishment, their then Minister Maria Larsson wrote, "When violence is used against children, their confidence in the adult world is damaged. And there is good reason to believe that if this violence is exercised by a child's own parent or by someone else close to them, the damage is greater." Sweden brought their laws in 1979. They're now over 35 years in place. Since 2006, the EU has emphasised the promotion and protection of children's rights as a priority issue. The European Parliament in 2009 resolution on the situation of fundamental rights across the EU called for a total ban on corporal punishment in all member states. And again in November 2014, the Parliament adopted a resolution calling on member states to uphold their obligations and combat any form of violence against children, including by formally prohibiting and sanctioning corporal punishment against children. Recently, we've seen at UN level, Ireland, through our permanent representative to the United Nations, David Donoghue, and our mission to the UN, they played a central role in the process as co-facilitators of the negotiations, together with Kenya, on transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And if we note Goal 16.1, it's to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and torture of children. Minister, colleagues, children's rights experts and advocates in Ireland concur. Indeed, in preparing for today, Tanya Ward, Chief Executive of Children's Rights Alliance, said, "The Children's Rights Alliance unites over 100 organisations working with children and their families across the country. Since our establishment in 1995, we've repeatedly called for the removal from Irish law of the defence of reasonable chastisement of children. Research is clear that corporal punishment has no benefits and can cause children physical and psychological harm and can lead to short and long-term effects on their safety, health and development. There is no justification for corporal punishment, and it is clearly at odds with Article 42A of the Constitution, which recognises and affirms the rights of all children and commits to protect and vindicates those rights by its laws. Children have an absolute right to be protected from harm and abuse under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Ireland ratified in 1992. There are no exceptions. This coming January, Ireland's progress on children's rights will be examined by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. The committee has criticised Ireland's position on corporal punishment in 1998 and 2006 and are likely to do so again in 2016. The Children's Rights Alliance has been leading the civil society engagement with the UN Committee and has prioritised corporal punishment as a key concern. There is no reason to delay. Ireland has a moral and legal duty to protect children from corporal punishment. And that's the end of her quote. Gráinne Long, Chief Executive of the ISPCC, says, as a national child protection charity, the ISPCC has long supported a ban on physical punishment of children. Through our national listening service, Childline, we hear on a daily basis the impact of violence towards children. Last year, we responded to nearly 37,000 contacts from children regarding abuse or welfare, and many were from children who were anxious, traumatised and scared in their own home due to violence. The ISPCC strongly supports the amendment to remove the defence of reasonable chastisement and believe it meets the spirit and intent of the Children First legislation. Whatever the circumstance, there is no reason why the law should permit a defence of hurt or violence towards a child. Far too often, the debate centres on the needs or preferences of parents rather than the rights of the child. The recent change to our constitution following the children's referendum requires us to think very differently and put children at the heart of our considerations. Seanad members therefore have a long overdue and timely opportunity to place in the law the right of the child to be safe in their own home. And we hope this opportunity will be grasped in the best interests of children. But Minister, I'm very conscious of the role of parents, so I contacted Laura Hawke, who's mum in residence and spokesperson for mummypages.ie. And she says mummypages.ie is the largest online parenting community, and our members wholeheartedly support the campaign to repeal the defence of reasonable chastisement by parents and childminders who mind up to 3 children in Irish law. She goes on to say, slapping another person, and especially a vulnerable child, is wrong in all circumstances. Firstly, allowing slapping by a caregiver to a child under the term reasonable chastisement is legalising physical violence to another person and a form of child abuse. It demonstrates that it's okay for a person to hit another person. Indeed, it's okay for a bigger or stronger person to hit a smaller or weaker person. This kind of behaviour can lead to intense abuse in the home for the child that does not learn quickly from the reasonable chastisement, and it is at complete odds with what is acceptable in today's adult society, or indeed the school playground. Initially, she says the child is hurt by the physical action and emotional breakdown of trust between parent and child, that they forget what they have done wrong. What you want in effective discipline is for the child to understand what they have done wrong and the consequences of their actions to others. You want the child to feel remorse, but ultimately to still believe they are a person of value. Slapping does not promote this. The main principle in promoting desirable behaviour is for the child to feel good and therefore be good. This is why regular, positive, affirmations of good behaviour is a much more effective tool to maintain this type of behaviour than anything else. It is now well researched that when responding to an incident with a child that requires discipline, turning into the child to understand exactly why they have misbehaved, helping them to realise how their behaviour might affect others, and consistent follow-through with age-appropriate consequences, it's much more effective than physical chastisement, no matter how reasonable it is perceived. And that's from Laura Hawke of Mummy Pages. Minister, I'm also very conscious of the comments made earlier this year by Pope Francis, and for me, while I wasn't appreciative of his individual comments, it was encouraging to see the response both nationally and at the level of the Vatican. In particular, I wish to cite the letter in the Irish Times by Mary McAleese, who noted that the Vatican is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the committee monitoring this wants all corporal punishment of children to be banned. And indeed, she added, in submissions to that committee last year, the Vatican said it did not promote corporal punishment, citing respect for the inviolability of physical life and the integrity of that person. The Vatican has responded by appointing Peter Saunders, founder of the National Association for People Abused in Childhood, a UK-based organisation, to the Papal Commission for the Protection of Minors. Peter Saunders was asked to lead on non-violence against children working group of this commission. I contacted Peter Saunders earlier today, and he advises me that these working group members are unanimous in their position, that there is never an instance where violence or reasonable chastisement is ever justifiable. Irish abuse survivor Marie Collins is also a member of the Papal Commission for the Protection of Minors. In discussions with both Marie Collins and Peter Saunders, they're extremely supportive of Ireland updating its laws to bring into effect a ban on corporal punishment in Ireland. Maria Santos-Payas, Special Representative of the Secretary-General on Violence Against Children, advocates that corporal punishment can be prevented by supporting caregivers in the use of non-violent child-rearing practices, by promoting advocacy and social mobilisation to safeguarding children's dignity and physical integrity, by reforming laws to introduce a clear ban on all forms of violence, including corporal punishment. We can make a real difference in the life of children, all children, everywhere and at all times. In ending, Minister, I say that Ireland is now out of step with parents, with children's rights advocates and with international best practice. With this amendment, we have a way to unite and agree that all citizens are equal.
Senator Maloney.
Not an awful lot left for me to say after that, I'm afraid. I think that Senator van Turnhout has covered everything in minute detail. When I first saw this amendment, I had my doubts and reservations about it, but I sat down and I thought about it at length. And like Senator van Turnhout's mother, I guess the wooden spoon was very prominent in my house as well. But like that, thankfully, I never had to use it either, but all I had to do was lift it. And the sculptor said that he wasn't risking taking a whack of it. But I know that I would have sent my son off up to his room and say, go to your room. But I found out later in life that he was delighted with that because he loved to read and he loved to be on his own. And he didn't see that as a punishment. He thought, this is great. I have the place to myself, and loved his reading and was happy out up there. My daughter was different. She would have loved to be down on the ticket things and didn't like being sent to her room. If we send a child to a childminder, I know my young granddaughter, who is just nearly 2, goes to a childminder now. I would absolutely hate the thought that if that childminder slapped her, it would absolutely gut me. And I wonder, why do we feel like that somebody else can't hit a child, but a parent can hit their child or slap their child? I know, where do you draw the line between reasonable chastisement and then where it becomes more physical and more violent? So it is best if we say, get rid of it altogether. And there is no need to slap your children. There are other ways of doing things, like I said, sending them to their room or stopping them watching a favourite programme on television or something that they wouldn't like doing, but having done to them. So there are ways of doing it without physical violence. So I would very much support Senator van Turnhout's amendment, and I'm hoping, Minister, that you will also see it that way, being in a position to accept her amendment. You know, if we were in school and another child hit a child and continuously were slapping him or doing that, we'd call that bullying. But it's not bullying in the home when a parent slaps their child. So we have to distinguish once and for all whether it's wrong or right for a parent to hit their child. Now, I have here the European Committee of Social Rights, that they've ruled that Ireland and Slovenia are in violation of the European Social Charter because all corporal punishment of children is not prohibited, while 28 Council of Europe's member states have prohibited corporal punishment in all settings, including the family home. So in the case of Ireland, the repeated findings by the committee highlights there has been no developments towards ensuring children's legal protection from corporal punishment for the past 12 years. So that's going on for quite some time, and nobody has done anything about it. And I think, in fairness to Senator van Turnhout, she has raised the issue now and put forward the amendment. And I hope that, and Minister, she's already said that you are a caring minister and you have worked hard on behalf of children. And I think everybody in this room will acknowledge that, and that you have done an awful lot of work for children since you took over as Minister for Children. And I hope that you will see it that you will be able to accept this amendment by Senator van Turnhout and not put any of us in a position to have to vote against it.
Senator Layton.
I'd like to commend Senator Jillian van Turnhout on this amendment. It's a very well worded amendment. I'd like to welcome her mother to the audience and to the gallery, because certainly she certainly has proven the point that her mother was a very good mother and caring mother and never actually used physical violence. And going back to the abolition of violence in schools, and teachers have been allowed to slap. I mean, it's in memory for most of people in the 50s or going to school in the 50s. It was a dreadful experience. I mean, like, with respect to Christian Brothers, and I had a lot of time for them, I had no problem myself with them. I thought they were an excellent teaching order. But when you know that there was a designed leather strap, an actual strap designed and actually made for them, and the word was 6 at the best. I mean, it was a terrifying experience to go up there, a little baby, a child of 10, 11, less, and hold your hand out there and be walloped. I mean, it was a terrifying experience, and that was abolished. I think it was former Minister John, his colleague who was in North Dublin, was in your constituency. Boland, yes, John Boland, that's right. He was the minister, I think, as far as I know, abolished through legislation the physical treatment of children. And, you know, on the eve of the rising 100th anniversary of the it would be a lovely gesture. And, you know, it was in the actual constitution, it's in the actual proclamation about the equal rights of children and treating all children equally. And this is one way of doing it. And there's no excuse, because what you're doing actually is you're perpetrating violence by using violence, that they will use the violence on their children, and it goes on and on and on, never ends. So I think, Minister, it would be worthwhile going back. I recommend that you don't have votes this evening on this particular issue, because you might find that the actual amendment is accepted by this House, and I think you should go back to government and say this is really serious. I mean, Senator van Turnhout has outlined exactly the overall international situation in this regard. We're regarded a Christian country, a Catholic country, and why should we be out of line? I'm a member of the Council of Europe for the last 7 years. I'm a deputy leader of the delegation from Ireland. I say I'm embarrassed by this matter being risen. 28 countries, I think, out of 47 have accepted the fact that this is wrong. And I don't see any justification for it. I know what your own experience. You're a medical doctor, Dr. Riley yourself, and I'm sure you've experienced children being very scared of parents. But like, if somebody witnessed somebody on the train or in the street hitting a child, hitting their own child, you'd have to intervene. But you've no right to intervene in things, Senator. That's correct. There's no way they can be actually. They're exempt. Yeah. No, but they're exempt from criminal prosecution. Please, the Garda can't actually intervene. But and I know children can, test their parents' strength, but I mean, to actually yield to physical violence. I mean, it's not a question of saying degrees of it, like, oh, it's okay to do X, it's okay to slap in the back of the leg, that's okay. It's not okay, because where do you draw the line, as Senator van Turnhout said? You can draw all the different degrees. Like, as a parent myself, like, I have to say, we never, myself, my Mary, we didn't do that. And I find it very hard to get up here today if I was actually being involved in that. Of course, the driving sometimes is very difficult, but to overcome that by different ways of saying, you can't go here, or we're not going here tomorrow, or forget about this or something. There are ways of doing it. I just think it's so obvious that I can't understand with all the different work that you're doing as Minister for Children, all the great work you're doing, all the work you're doing in jobs and all that sort of work you're doing for children and trying to protect children. That one amendment could change the whole attitude to children in this country. And those that will oppose it are the ones that will exercise those rights themselves. I don't think any parent that is against corporal punishment of children would oppose you as Minister, or the Fine Gael party, or the Labour Party in government. And I'm speaking as a member of Fianna Fáil, but I'm not mandated to say it, but I say it quite frankly. I can speak authoritatively in the sense that I would be very disappointed to think that Fianna Fáil party would not support this amendment, and I'm supporting it. And I'll say this, but I don't consult with other people in the party on these issues. I have a good feeling about these things. I know I've been here, I've been Minister for Health myself in different departments. So I know the restrictions, I know the Minister's restriction, I know the advice he's getting from senior public servants who are here, I presume, and others. So I'd like the Minister to outline exactly, would you reflect on this now tonight? Just reflect before. At first there wasn't a vote on it because it commits it too much, but if you talked at report stage, Minister, and say even that you're looking at the different repercussions, or you're discussing with your colleagues in government, or you're prepared to consider the situation. I just think Senator Turnhout has done a great work. I mean, you've done the statesman service. Your appointment by the Taoiseach was a very intelligent decision by the government, appointing so many talented people on the Committee 11, and you were one of them. And you brought to this House that enormous experience, because, quite frankly, we wouldn't have the same expertise that you have. And through the show, we wouldn't be here tonight in the same depth that you have, in the expertise you have, and the research you've done. It takes a lot of work to have that kind of time. But you put into very detailed work our thoughts and our feelings and our aspirations. And I'm not being, there's no political mileage in this, quite frankly. I suppose there's none whatsoever, because people say, well, look, we have a right to do this, we can stop our children, we go on to that's nanny state taking over. But just think about 1916, 2016, when you had a wonderful gesture, that was the year, that the eve of that year, we want to delay this thing, just signs into order, but it come into force that 100 years on the horizon, that the children of this country are protected from abuse inside the home, outside the home, in schools, in institutions, everywhere. That's a great aspiration. I think if Senator Jillian van Turnhout can achieve that through her persuasive ability, her mother certainly will be very proud tonight. I think this country will be very proud, and will owe you a great debt of gratitude.
Senator Barrett.
And I was listening to Senator van Turnhout, and I had to come up. Her speech was splendid. I got a message from the British Medical Journal recently, Minister, and they were asking for thoughts on Dr. Cyril Daly, who is a fellow medical practitioner who led this campaign for a very long time in Ireland. So I'm working on that coincidence first, and the second that John Boland, who was a neighbour of yours up in the North County. So I hope all those portents are good. Owen Skeffington was a predecessor of mine who ran with this campaign, and apparently in the house one day we were told that somebody said to him, I was beaten when I was a child, it didn't do me any harm. And Skeffington replied, the question is what did do the harm? You know, the House of Lords would have probably had, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, it's good for somebody, it'll make a man out of him, and all this kind of stuff. This is Victorian stuff that, you know, children should be seen, not heard. It's completely outdated by developments in education like Montessori schools and so on. It's completely outdated by the way we see children now, their friends. We never dream of beating them. Violence doesn't solve problems. It's an abuse of power, as Senator van Turnhout said, for any big person to hit a small person anyway. So I'd hope that you will have reflections, as Senator Layton has said. We just had a referendum which probably would have been undreamed of, because the people are far more radical than we are in here. And I would say very strongly, Minister, that the people of this country don't want children to be beaten by adults in any context. I certainly think that you know, where it used to happen most, unfortunately, was when children were smaller. There's a certain amount of bullying in primary schools. And the atmosphere in primary schools, so you hear this, children actually want to go to school. Instead of coming back and saying, I got slapped in school, you must have done something to deserve it. Like, we've moved on from all of those kind of outdated ways of looking at things. And as a radical on smoking minister, I'm trying to exercise whatever charm I might have to persuade you to be radical on this one as well. I think the portents are very good. What Cyril Daly did, what John Boland did, what Owen Skeffington advocated here, and what the electorate recently decided, that this kind of way of viewing children is completely outdated. And I'm persuaded by Senator van Turnhout's eloquence in that regard. Thank you, Minister.
Senator Henry.
Thank you, Catherine. Minister, I just want to say congratulate Senator van Turnhout. As usual, she is an expert in this House and has a great interest in the welfare of children, and you spoke very well here this evening. I just want to say in relation to this, we spoke a lot in this House in recent years about the protection of children, and this is what we were talking about, is protecting children. I do hope, Minister, that you will give it some consideration. I'm not quite sure, you know, specifically, I suppose, it's very important that children are protected in their own home. So I'm not quite sure how we can manage that, or how we can actually deal with that when we are speaking about protection of children in their own home. So we probably are relying on the children themselves and the whole. Anyway, I'm sure it is a little bit complicated, but certainly, Minister, I would appreciate if you would give us some thought, because, as I say, we have come a long way in relation to the protection of children in this country, and you and the Minister, the previous Minister, has done a lot of work in relation to issues that have gone on in the past in relation to children in this country, very disturbing issues. And I do feel, as spokesperson on children in this House, that we have come a long way, but we have a lot to do also. And certainly I would be very happy if you would give this a serious consideration.
Tara.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the Senators for their contributions. I'd like to say at the outset, I had the pleasure of knowing John Boland, and I'm still very good friends with his widow, Kay. And indeed, the late Cyril Daly, I knew very well as well. He was very well known for a very comical column he used to write in the Irish Medical Times under the headline of Dr. Slimo Sloothery. The name itself will give you an indication of the sort of antics that were described. But on a very serious note, I'd like to sincerely thank Senator van Turnhout for bringing forward this amendment for discussion. It is an important matter, and it's one in which I share the objective sought by the Senator. I also take this opportunity to repeat that the Government is fully committed to working towards the elimination of corporal punishment and to further protecting children from violence. And I'd like to comment on something that a number of senators have spoken to, and indeed Senator Mulder-Henry has mentioned. And it puts me in mind of what we do in law is to send a strong message that we hope will be followed by a cultural shift. Just as in the marriage equality referendum, we have sent a very strong message out. But we know that there are still biases out there against same-sex couples. And we believe that through that referendum we've sent a very strong message that that's not acceptable in our society anymore, and it will change. Equally here with this, I believe the same will be the case. And can I just say that although various provisions exist under Irish law and administrative measures that prohibit or aim to prohibit the use of corporal punishment in non-family settings, it has been acknowledged that these arrangements do not reach the standard required by international instruments to which Ireland is a party, such as the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Council of Europe's revised Social Charter. In that very context, earlier this year, Ireland was found to be in violation of the revised Social Charter. This was the second such finding, the previous one having been made in 2004. As I view the particular matter as one of equality before the law, rather than any intrusion on the exercise of legitimate parental authority, I resolved to set about addressing this issue as quickly as possible. Accordingly, in response to the finding of a violation, Ireland gave particular commitments to the Council of Europe. The first of these commitments related to bringing in regulations to expressly prohibit in the law the use of corporal punishment in certain state childcare settings where this was already not the case, essentially covering foster care and residential care situations. I'm pleased to inform the House that preparations for making such regulations are almost complete, and I would hope to be in a position to sign them into law very shortly. The second commitment related to the matter of the common law defence of reasonable chastisement, which is the subject of the Senator's amendment. In that regard, Ireland undertook to the Council of Europe to initiate arrangements to examine the potential under the Irish legal framework to remove this defence. This is something my department has been working on actively and purposefully since the commitment was given a number of months ago. A proposed provision in law which involves children, their parents and the state has considerable chance of engaging issues of constitutional rights and therefore needs to be very carefully examined. A very thorough and sure-footed approach is required in preparing any measure to reduce the prospect of a successful challenge in the future, which will not to be anyone's benefit and certainly not to that of children. So really, to put it in a sentence, I don't want this House to be responsible for me proposing a law that will be struck down by the courts. The aim of the current work by my department is to ensure that there is strongest policy and legal grounding for action in this potentially legal sensitive area. These steps constitute a normal, prudent approach to ensuring that legislative measures, particularly where the state interacts with the family, consider implications and vulnerabilities as extensively as possible to provide the greatest level of confidence that the measure is sustainable. In other words, we want it to stick. Given the advanced stage of that work, I consider it may be possible to bring it to completion very soon, and indeed to coincide with a report stage consideration of the Senator's amendment. I therefore respectfully suggest for the Senator's consideration that she agree to postpone the termination of her amendment until report stage. At that time, I expect to be in a position to let her know whether or not such an amendment can be accepted. And I want to say that I have been in discussions with the Attorney General. I've been in discussions with my department as late as yesterday morning and this morning, and that we're very hopeful. There's absolutely no ideological issue here. Everybody wants this to happen. I don't want to leave this behind us. I'm very much struck by what Senator Layton has said as we come into 2016, that we honour that proclamation in a very real way. So I would ask for forbearance. Time is against me in that I can't, with absolute authority or confidence, accept the amendment today, but I have no doubt that by report stage, one way or the other, there will be a clear answer on this. And if I have my way, the answer is going to be that we will have this defence of reasonable chastisement removed from the statute books. So I hope you'll accept my bona fides on that. Turnhout.
Thank you very much. Minister, I absolutely accept your bona fides on this issue, and I think, as is seen here in evidence in the House tonight, we all share the objective. And I do want to acknowledge the work that is being done by your officials, Minister, in the Department of Children and Youth Affairs and by the AG. Minister, yes, I am cognizant that it could be challenged in law, as any laws could be, but the likelihood is then, if it is challenged, it's going to be by somebody who's in violation of the law. The difficulty is that very often if somebody starts with disciplining a child by a tap or a slap, when that's not effective, how do you escalate it? How do you upgrade? And we see too many cases. We need to send a very clear message that violence against children is unacceptable. I'm also very conscious when people talk to me on this issue. This is not about judging parents, and I don't in any way want that my words here tonight will be about judging parents. And sometimes I'm asked, well, surely it's acceptable if a child's about to run across the road. If a child's about to run across the road, surely you grab the child to protect them. You don't slap or hit the child. There is no reason to have violence against a child. But there are situations, all too often I can see when children will misbehave. One of my pet peeves at the moment, Minister, is these carousel sort of queuing systems in shops that have sweets all at the eye level of children. So all us adults are queuing and are able to look around the shop, but the children are being bombarded with sweets and naturally feel that this is, let me take these, and a parent is trying to ensure that their child behaves. Now, for me, in that situation, it's important that we actually support the parent, and in those situations, I've complained to the shopkeepers that I find it unacceptable that they are putting parents in this situation of having sweets at eye levels of children. That I'm not trying to judge the parent, because the commercial sector has created a very difficult situation for that parent. And I think we should always work to help the parents in that important role, that critical role that they have. Minister, I welcome what you've said here tonight. I believe that children are rights holders, as the people of Ireland do, and they need to be equal before the law. Minister, I'm not precious about it being my amendment or a government amendment. If there's a better wording to ensure that we can do it right, I want to try and see that we can bring this into law. I think what has been said about doing it on the eve of 2016, it is time. Now is the time that we need to do it. It's well overdue. So, Minister, I hope that we're standing here next week in a position to accept an amendment that Ireland will at last repeal the defence of reasonable chastisement. The very idea that we could wait to have it tested in courts, what does reasonable chastisement mean? When I've read some of the definitions, it horrors me that we could in any way allow this remain in our books, in our common law. So, Minister, I very much thank you for your words tonight, and I thank you and I wish bon courage to you and your officials, and I'm here to help, if anything I can do to help in ensuring that we all will be in the position that we wish to be next week. I will bring it to a vote if the government is not in a position to support it. You know that, Minister, because I just feel passionately about this. I only have a few months left. Whenever there is an election, I only have a few months left here. This is an issue that has been close to my heart for many years. I've seen too many children where it's acceptable and violence escalates within a family. We have to send a clear message out, which indeed I think my colleagues here in the Senate tonight have clearly done. Across the aisles, we've clearly said violence against children is unacceptable in all its forms. Thank you.
The amendment 6 withdrawn by Leave of the House. Is that agreed?